I'm ConceptSoup. This is a bottle of Versace Eros Flame Eau de Parfum. And this is the most powerful PC I've ever built. And I've built over 700 PCs at this point. We'll go through the parts we chose, why we chose them, speed through a build montage, and end with the gaming performance. Sound fun? Well, of course it does. So let's begin. And yes, today I am standing up. Look how free I am. Woo! Firstly, I gotta say, these graphics cards are getting a bit ridiculous, both in price and size. I mean, this thing is enormous. Let me get it. This is the Asus TUF OC RTX 4090, and I'm holding it the wrong way around. It's a 3 to 4 slotter and sticks out pretty far from the motherboard as well, so finding a case that's going to fit this might be a challenge. The packaging and the design are really cool though. I suppose it should be though for 2100 bloody quid. Supposedly this thing is an absolute monster, so I'm looking forward to seeing the performance. And in keeping with having the latest tech, we're keeping it brand spanking new with this CPU. This is the Ryzen 7700X, which is the latest AM5 platform, if you like. It's got 8 cores and 16 threads like most Ryzen 7s do. I find the Ryzen 7s are the best for gaming, and going past this barely gives you any more performance. That and the Ryzen 9s tend to have a bit slower latency as well for some technical reasons that we won't get into right now. For the cooling, we're using this 240mm Deepcool Castle liquid cooler, which should provide plenty of cooling as well as some lovely aesthetics. I'd say if you've got space, go for a 360mm liquid cooler instead of this 240 to keep the noise lower, as long as your case can actually fit one in, especially taking into account the dimensions of this Asus TUF RTX 4090. Now with a new platform comes a new motherboard, the Asus TUF B650 plus Wi-Fi. Now this thing looks amazing, simply amazing. It has really gone all in with the blocky military theme, and it will match nicely with the TUF video card that we spoke about earlier. Now performance wise, it's going to handle any CPU that fits in the socket. In fact, it's massively overdone for what we need. It's always good to have Wi-Fi on board, which this one does, because even if you've got Ethernet and you use wired internet all the time, you never know when that cable's going to break, and you never know when you might just need Wi-Fi to get you out of a pinch. The memory is this Corsair DDR5 RGB at 6000 MHz, which is optimal for Ryzen systems. In fact, there's a little sticker down in the bottom corner there, the little red sticker that says AMD Expo, which is the sort of the new name for XMP or DOCP. Which is basically the one-click overclocking that you get on this RAM to get the full speed. Now, this is pretty nice RAM, but really anything of the same spec is going to be fine. We went for this because it looks really nice. For storage, we went with a 1TB WD Black SN850, which is PCIe version 4, which makes it very fast. There's also DRAM on board, which means it's not going to slow down if you're using it for long periods. Enough said, really. It's just an SSD. I find SSDs and RAM pretty boring, but they are necessary for the system. Now, a snarling beast of a machine needs a high capacity power supply, and that's why we went with this 1000 watt 80 plus gold unit from EVGA. It's the 1000GQ, so don't get that confused with the popular men's magazine, but this is going to provide plenty of power for this system. You're going to have enough cables to power this RTX 4090, and it's good to go even a bit over the spec that they say. I believe for the 4090s most people are saying you should get at least 1000 watts, but on many of the product pages they're saying 850 is going to be enough for this. I don't think so. I think you definitely want at least a 1000 watt from a good manufacturer. Now, because the RTX 4090 uses a fancy new power connector, we got this Fasgear braided extension, which converts 4 PCIe 8 pins into a single 12 pin, the 12 pin being this new fancy connector. So we're going to see how this gets on. I've heard a few other people use this and they say it works fine, so we shall see. But it's painful whenever you have this new kind of connector because you're in a sort of a transition period now between using a standard 8-pin versus this new connector. But overall, in the long term, this is actually going to be fantastic, this single connector. because it's going to make things much more streamlined. Because if the trend continues with graphics card using more and more power, we're going to get to the point where we're needing 5 8-pin PCIe cables. It's going to just become an absolute mess. So whilst we're in that transition period, I think this is a way to go, certainly moving forward. And what case, you say, is going to hold all of this beastly hardware with the kind of wattage this system is going to put out? I'd say airflow is a major must. So we've gone with the LANCOOL 215 by Lian-Li. Now, I don't have it in my hands because it would fill the whole screen, but the 2 giant 200mm fans on the front should provide plenty of airflow to the hot mummers inside. So you've heard the parts, now it's time to assemble and test, so let's go.
It's cool. Just lying here on the floor, cold towels, my feet against the door. How long have I been in this space? Arms over eyes, help me retrace. How did I become the doormat here? Memories spinning around my head seem pretty cavalier. Little by little you take control. It's a little uncivil how your game's in motion. And I don't even notice that I'm playing your game. Till you leave me a warning thinking I'm the one to play. From my heart has made it pretty clear. Little by little you take control. It's a little uncivil how your game's in motion. And I don't even notice that I'm playing your game. Till you leave me warning thinking I'm the one to
Frankly, this machine is a Herculean monster. It's not often the LANCOOL 215 looks cramped and filled out, but this TUF 4090 has done just that. It's actually ridiculous. But overall, I really like the look of this build. Plenty of gamer RGB, but not too in your face, and it all syncs up in Armoury Crate software. There's a lovely mesh on the front, and that's going to provide fantastic airflow through the case. Pretty tasty proposition indeed. But now our thoughts on the performance. This is what I call a generational leap. This is a true generational leap. The best way to think about this is that the performance of the RTX 4090 is roughly the same as the performance of 2 RTX 3070s put together. In fact, it's a little bit more than that. It's about 80% faster than the RTX 3080, again, roughly. Now, I think of the RTX 3070 as a 4K 60 graphics card, that meaning 60 FPS at 4K on high settings. That means this RTX 4090 is a 4K 120 graphics card. In fact, I'd say it goes even higher than that. In addition, the ray tracing performance, if you care about that, is boosted as well on the new generation of cards. I was very impressed with the cooler on the TUF model as well, barely breaking a sweat and staying under 70 degrees in our stress test. As for the Ryzen 7700X, I was a bit less enthusiastic about this, mainly because for way less money you could get the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D and get similar performance in games. I just think CPUs are so fast nowadays that it's okay to skip a generation or two or even three because we're mainly being held back by graphics performance. The Fasgear adapter seemed to hold up well also, though it'll be nice when manufacturers start producing nicer looking cables for these. I thought these were slightly thin and looked a little bit weedy. At least we did not have to use the dreaded octopus. My god, I hate how ugly this thing is, and I can't believe we're getting charged all this money for these expensive graphics cards, and that is the adapter that comes in the box, this octopus thing. I think that's actually atrocious. But that said, cable managing all those PCIe 8-pin cables was pretty tough. I really had to stuff it in there. And I always recommend using 4 separate modular cables rather than 2, plus the 2 daisy-chained ones. I use this all the time when I build systems. I try to avoid using daisy-chained 8-pin adapters just because I feel it reduces the coil whine of the machine, but also it just makes things more stable. You're using less load per cable, and I think overall it's a bit safer. Speaking of coil whine, that was a problem that I had with this machine. I think just because of the sheer number of watts this RTX 4090 is pulling, you were getting a fair amount of coil whine, but just like coil whine in any other components, it might actually just come away over time as things bed in. But overall, what a machine. A truly massive step forward in graphics, but my friends, it comes at a price. And for me, that price is just not worth it. We need to take a step back and yes, admire the advances in tech, but also pause and think whether we actually need this. I sure as hell don't, and I bet most of you don't either. Most people, I would say, don't need more than RTX 3070 level of performance, at least from my experience, but hey, what do I know? Everyone is an individual. Now, if you like the video, tell me in the comments and subscribe so we can meet again. And never, ever forget that this is Versace Eros Flame Eau de Parfum, and it smells, actually, rather nice.